They called it a sanctuary for the forgotten. But Winslow House carried a legacy darker than its walls could contain. This isn't folklore. It happened, and the children who entered were never seen again. October 12th, 1993, 11:47 p.m. Daniel Harper pulled his car onto the shoulder of the deserted road. The headlights caught the silhouette of the orphanage at the end of the gravel path, and for a long moment, he couldn't bring himself to switch the engine off. The building loomed in the distance, 3 stories of rotting brick and shattered glass, its gables sharp against the cloudy night sky. The iron gate sagged open as though it had been waiting for him. Daniel was no thrill-seeker. He wasn't one of those late-night explorers chasing cheap adrenaline. He was a freelance journalist, 28 years old, with a stubborn streak and an instinct for stories no one else wanted to tell. His editor had brushed off the rumors about Winslow House as local ghost stories, but Daniel's gut told him differently. Too many missing children, too many blank spaces in public records, and too many locals who went quiet the second the name Winslow was mentioned. He killed the engine, grabbed his flashlight and tape recorder, and stepped out into the cold night air. Gravel crunched under his shoes. The smell of damp earth rose up from the field. The front doors were warped but unlocked. They groaned as Daniel pushed them open, sending echoes rolling through the empty halls. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on flaking wallpaper and broken furniture left to rot. But what unsettled him most were the portraits. Dozens of them lined the entry hall, paintings of pale children posed stiffly beside adults dressed in black. The adults wore the same grim expression, their features sharp and stern. But the children, their eyes were wide, their faces strangely blank, as though they were already fading from life. Daniel's recorder clicked on. His voice was steady, though his stomach twisted. Entry log, October 12, 1993. Winslow Orphanage. Building abandoned for over 20 years. Condition, unstable. Portraits intact. Expression of children unnerving. He lowered the recorder but couldn't shake the feeling that the painted eyes were following him as he moved deeper into the hall. At 12:32 a.m., Daniel reached the main staircase. The air here was colder, damp with a faint metallic tang that clung to his throat. He paused, straining to listen. Footsteps. Light, quick, like a child running barefoot down the corridor above. He froze. His heart was hammered. He knew the building was empty. Local authorities had sealed it years ago, yet the sound continued, faint but deliberate, until it faded into silence. Probably rats, Daniel whispered to himself. But the words felt hollow. He climbed the stairs, the beam of his flashlight dancing across peeling wallpaper. Every so often he caught fragments of sound, a giggle, a sigh, the brush of fabric. Each time his skin prickled. He found himself in a long hallway lined with doors. Some hung open, revealing small rooms with iron bed frames and mattresses covered in mold. Toys sat abandoned on the floor, wooden blocks, a headless doll, a ball with faded paint. Daniel crouched to examine them, pressing record. Artifacts left behind. Toys from the 1950s, possibly earlier. Items too decayed to have been planted. A sudden clink echoed behind him. He spun, flashlight darting to the far end of the hall. A metal ball rolled slowly from one of the rooms, stopping at his feet. The air dropped several degrees. Daniel's breath fogged in front of him. He left the ball where it was and backed away. At 1:13 a.m., Daniel reached the basement entrance at the end of the hall. The wooden door was reinforced with iron bands, its handle rusted but still intact. His hand hovered over it. Every instinct screamed not to open it, but he had come this far. The hinges screeched as he pulled it wide. The stench hit him immediately. Damp stone mixed with something fouler, metallic, like rusted iron soaked in blood. He gagged, covering his nose with his sleeve, and forced himself down the stairs. The beam of his flashlight flickered, sputtering as though reluctant to illuminate what lay below. The basement stretched wider than expected. Rows of iron bed frames lined the walls, some still bearing cracked leather restraints. Chains bolted into the floor rattled softly in the draft. On the far wall, crude carvings covered the stone, symbols Daniel didn't recognize, etched deep as if clawed into place, and then he saw them. At first, he thought they were shadows cast by his light, but when he steadied the beam, the shapes didn't move with it. They stood in clusters between the bed frames. Children. Their faces were pale, almost translucent. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, hollow and endless. Their lips moved silently, words too soft to hear. Daniel's throat tightened. He stumbled backward, bumping into a bed frame with a loud metallic clang. The whispers rose instantly, dozens of voices overlapping, childlike but filled with something ancient. Daniel. He froze. His name. They were whispering his name. The flashlight flickered violently, plunging the room into stuttering darkness. Every time the beam cut out, the children seemed closer. Their mouths are wider, their whispers sharper. Daniel's chest heaved. He turned and bolted for the stairs, stumbling as the voices swelled into a roar. Daniel! The door slammed shut behind him, throwing him back into silence. His flashlight steadied. The hallway was empty, but he knew what he had seen. Daniel staggered outside into the cold night air, his lungs burning, his mind reeling. He didn't look back at the orphanage, but as he collapsed against his car, he realized something chilling. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were still in his ears, low and insistent, following him into the night, and they knew his name. They say the past leaves marks, sometimes on buildings, sometimes on people. But at Winslow, the past didn't just leave marks. It followed anyone who dared to look too closely, and Daniel Harper was about to learn that escaping the orphanage didn't mean escaping the children. October 13th, 1993, 2:07 a.m. Daniels. Hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel. He hadn't even driven a mile from Winslow House before pulling over again, his breath shallow, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The whispers were still there. Faint, layered, impossible to ignore. Daniel. He slammed the tape recorder against the passenger seat, furious at his own trembling. He rewound the tape and pressed play, hoping to hear something, anything, that proved he wasn't losing his mind. The recording crackled, his own steady voice narrating, entry log, October 12th, 1993. Then silence, then Daniel. He hit stop instantly. His skin crawled. The whisper hadn't come from his mouth. By dawn, Daniel sat in his apartment in downtown Bristol, curtains drawn tight, tape recorder still on the table. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the pale faces of the children, their mouths forming his name. He made coffee, black and bitter, and tried to rationalize it. Stress, sleep deprivation, suggestion, that was all. But then he noticed something that broke his reasoning apart. On his shirt sleeve, faint but unmistakable, was a handprint, small, too small for any adult. The outline of tiny fingers pressed into the fabric as though someone had grabbed him in the basement and refused to let go. His stomach turned cold. Daniel knew he had to go deeper. If the children weren't hallucinations, if their whispers were real, then there had to be records. Survivors, something. At 11:30 a.m., he walked into the Bristol Public Archives, his notebook tucked under his arm. The clerk, an older woman with thin-rimmed glasses, looked up as he approached. "I'm researching Winslow Orphanage," Daniel said, keeping his tone casual. The clerk's smile faltered. She adjusted her glasses, eyes narrowing. "That place has been closed for decades. What exactly are you looking for?" "Admissions, staff records, anything from the 1940s to the 1960s. Her lips tightened. "Those files are sealed. On whose authority?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You don't want to go digging into Winslow. Families tried. Reporters tried. People stopped asking." Daniel leaned closer, whispering. "But they didn't stop disappearing, did they?" The clerk paled, her gaze shifting to the side. Finally, she scribbled something on a scrap of paper and slid it across the counter. "Basement. Row C, box 47. You didn't hear it from me." Dust clung to every box in the basement archives. Daniel coughed as he pulled box 47 from the shelf and set it on the table. Inside were brittle documents, yellowed with age. Adoption papers, birth records, intake forms. But the names told a story all their own. From 1946 to 1962, Winslow took in over 200 children, but the adoption records ended abruptly. Out of 200, only 27 had official placements. The rest simply stopped appearing in the paperwork. No transfers. No deaths reported. No explanations. They hadn't left the orphanage. They had vanished. Among the files, one stood out, a transcript of a 1971 police interview with a former resident, Margaret Alcott, age 42. Her words were scrawled in messy typewriter ink. "We weren't adopted. We were chosen. Some nights they'd come for us. Always at night. The matron said it was for our own good. Said the Winslows needed us. We heard the chanting from the basement. We heard the chains. The ones who went down. They never came back. Daniel read the passage twice, his pulse quickening. This wasn't a legend. This was testimony. He stuffed the transcript into his notebook and hurried out. He had a name now. A survivor. It took 3 days. Countless phone calls, and more dead ends than he cared to count. But finally, Daniel found her. October 16th, 1993, 6:14 p.m. Margaret Alcott lived alone on the edge of town in a crumbling Victorian house. The yard was overgrown, shutters hanging loose. Her neighbors said she kept to herself, rarely left, and never spoke of her past. Daniel knocked 3 times. At first, there was nothing. Then the sound of locks clicking, one after another. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 60s, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling. "Who sent you?" she demanded. "No one. My name's Daniel Harper. I'm investigating Winslow House. I found your statement in the archives." At the mention of Winslow, she flinched, gripping the doorframe for support. "You shouldn't have come here. Please," Daniel urged. "I need to know what happened." "The children, their records disappear. You're the only one left who can tell me the truth." Her eyes darted past him to the street, then back. She sighed, defeated, and opened the door wider. 5 minutes. No more. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and old books. Dust coated every surface. Margaret led him to the living room, where she lowered herself into a chair and stared at her hands. "It wasn't an orphanage," she said flatly. "It was a farm." Daniel frowned. "A farm?" "For them. The Winslows." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and haunted. They weren't just caretakers. They were something else. Old blood, old rituals. They needed children, our fear, our innocence. They fed on it. Daniel leaned forward. "What happened to the others?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They never left the basement." We could hear them screaming. Then silence. By morning, their beds were empty. His stomach twisted. "And you? How did you escape?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't escape. I was spared. I don't know why. But I hear them still, at night. The voices of the ones they took. They never stopped calling my name." She suddenly gripped his wrist, her nails digging deep. "And now they'll call yours too." Before Daniel could respond, a sharp sound echoed through the house. A child's giggle. Both froze. Margaret's face was drained of color. She released his wrist, trembling. "They followed you here," she whispered. "You should never have gone back there." Daniel turned toward the sound, his heart pounding. The giggle came again, closer this time, followed by the soft patter of bare feet running across the upstairs floor. And then, silence. Margaret stared at him with hollow eyes. "They've chosen you. Records can be forged. Memories can fade. But when every survivor tells the same story, when every whisper matches the next, then it stops being legend. It becomes evidence. And Daniel Harper was now holding evidence no one wanted him to see. October 16th, 1993, 7:02 p.m. Daniel sat stiff in Margaret Alcott's crumbling living room. The tape recorder hidden inside his jacket capturing every word. The silence after the footsteps upstairs still rang in his ears. He wanted to believe it was a trick, some coincidence, but the way Margaret stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, lips trembling, told him otherwise. "They never stop," she whispered. "They'll follow anyone who speaks their names. And you've said them, haven't you? You've read their files, spoke aloud what was meant to be buried." Daniel forced his voice steady. "I don't believe in ghosts. There's a rational explanation for..." Before he could finish, the ceiling above them groaned. Wood creaked as if someone, or something, was shifting its weight just a few feet overhead. Margaret grabbed his arm, nails digging deep. "Go now, before they decide you belong here too." Daniel left without another word. His car was parked beneath a broken street lamp, its pale light flickering like it could give out at any second. He fumbled for his keys, but his eyes were fixed on the upper windows of Margaret's house. For just a moment he swore he saw a small face peering down at him through the cracked glass. Hollow eyes, a child's face, mouth open in a silent scream. When he blinked, it was gone. He drove off, his heart hammering. Margaret's final words echoing in his mind. "They've chosen you." The next morning, Daniel tried to push it aside. He buried himself in notes, clippings, and Margaret's transcript. But the children's voices followed him. In the hiss of the shower, he heard faint laughter. In the hum of his refrigerator, whispers threaded his name. On his answering machine, one message came through with static so loud he almost didn't hear the voice at the end. Daniel. He slammed the machine off, breathing hard. Sleep became impossible. He stayed awake, chain-smoking, his walls plastered with photocopied records and newspaper clippings. Winslow consumed him, and then, at 3:41 a.m., he found something that froze him cold. It was buried in the archives of a 1952 local newspaper. A grainy black-and-white photograph of the Winslow family posing outside the orphanage gates. Mr. and Mrs. Winslow, dressed in elegant clothes. 2 children of their own, standing stiffly. And behind them, the orphans, but their faces were wrong. In the second row, a boy's eyes were entirely black, like polished stone. A girl beside him had her mouth twisted in an unnatural grin, stretching too wide. And though it was a still image, Daniel could swear that their expressions shifted when he looked longer. He dropped the photo onto his desk, shoving his chair back. That was when the knock came at the door. October 18th, 1993, 12:26. AM 3, sharp knocks. Daniel froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. His apartment was on the 4th floor, and visitors never came this late. He approached the door slowly, every instinct screaming at him to stay silent. Another 3 knocks, louder this time. Who is it? He called, voice tight. No answer. He pressed his eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. But when he stepped back, he noticed something under the door. A small slip of paper. Pushed from the other side, hands shaking, he picked it up. On it, in childlike scrawl, were the words, "Don't look in the basement." The note sat heavy in his hands. He thought of Margaret's words, of the children's faces, of the countless records that ended with no explanation. He should have walked away, burned the papers, tried to rebuild his life, but he couldn't. By October 19th, Daniel was back at the orphanage gates, camera slung around his neck, flashlight in hand. The building loomed darker than before, windows like hollow eyes staring back at him. His voice recorder clicked on. Entry log, October 19th, 1993. I've come back. If something happens to me, let this be proof. The children deserve to be remembered. The heavy front doors groaned as he pushed them open. The smell of mold and rot spilled out, thicker than last time, and this time the house felt awake. Daniel moved slowly through the corridors, every step echoing too loud. The portraits still hung on the walls, but now several frames were empty. His flashlight beam trembled as he reached the locked basement door. He didn't even remember pulling the crowbar from his bag, but within seconds the lock snapped free. The air that rushed up was damp and foul, heavy with something that made his throat tighten. He descended, each step creaking beneath his weight. At the bottom, the beam revealed rows of iron bed frames lined like soldiers. Some still held thin, mold-eaten mattresses. Chains dangled from the posts, and on the far wall, scratched deep into the stone, were dozens of names. Children's names, all the ones from the records, and beneath them, scrawled larger and fresher than the rest, was one more Daniel. The flashlight flickered, a sound filled the air, soft, overlapping voices, dozens of them. Children, whispering in unison, so close it felt like their lips brushed against his ears. Daniel. The light went out, and in the darkness, small cold hands closed around his ankles. Every ghost story has a moment when disbelief shatters, when logic gives way to something darker. For Daniel Harper, that moment had arrived, because now he wasn't reading about the missing children. He was standing in their prison, and they knew his name. October 19th, 1993, 11:58 p.m. Daniel's flashlight went dead, plunging the basement into blackness. Dozens of whispers pressed in from all sides, circling him like vultures. Hands, small, cold, insistent, gripped his ankles, tugged at his jeans, brushed across his wrists. He kicked wildly, stumbling backward, his breath sharp and ragged. "Get off me!" he shouted, voice breaking. The recorder in his pocket clicked, capturing the frantic scrapes of his boots against the stone floor. The whispers overlapped, some calling his name, others crying, some giggling, all layered into a terrible chorus. And then, silence. The hands released him. The flashlight sputtered back to life with a weak beam. Daniel's eyes darted around the basement, desperate. That was when he saw it, etched into the ground in a perfect circle, smeared in ash and something darker. Symbols, strange curling shapes, like letters from an alphabet he didn't know. At the center of the circle lay a single iron chair bolted to the ground. Rust streaking the stone beneath it, Daniel raised the recorder. His voice shook. Basement chamber, ritual markings on the floor, restraints visible. As he stepped closer, a sudden chill pressed against his skin. He felt watched, surrounded, and then the whisper came again, but clearer this time. You shouldn't have come back. Panic surged. Daniel bolted for the stairs, stumbling over chains and splintered boards. He didn't dare look back. The children's laughter followed him, echoing unnaturally through the walls. He reached the main hall and slammed the basement door shut. Chest heaving, the portraits lining the corridor seemed different now. Where once there had been painted eyes, there were now empty sockets, black holes staring at him from the canvas. He raised his flashlight, then nearly dropped it. One of the portraits had changed entirely. It was no longer a child's face. It was his. Daniel staggered, outside into the freezing night air, fumbling with his keys until he reached his car. He slammed the locks down, hands trembling as he dialed his contact at the Bristol Gazette. Peter, it's Harper. I found something. Basement records, all of it. You need to get here. Bring a camera crew. This is bigger than any of us thought. On the other end, Peter's voice was groggy. Daniel, it's past midnight. Slow down. Where are you? Winslow House. Bring people. I have proof. The line crackled. Static swallowed Peter's reply. And then, faintly, another voice whispered through the receiver. Daniel. The call dropped. The car engine refused to start. The key turned, the motor whined, but nothing caught. Daniel swore, slamming the wheel. That was when he saw them. In the orphanage windows, pale faces pressed against the glass. Dozens of children, shoulder to shoulder, all staring down at him with hollow eyes. One by one, their mouths opened, and though he couldn't hear them, he knew exactly what they were saying. His name. Desperation forced him out of the car. He sprinted across the grounds, a flashlight beam cutting through the weeds until it caught on something. A small shed, half collapsed near the tree line. The door was rotted. But inside he found what he needed: old kerosene cans, tools, and a rusted lantern. An idea sparked. If he couldn't prove what he saw, if he couldn't convince anyone to believe him, maybe he could burn Winslow House to the ground, erase it, bury its horrors for good. Back at the main steps, he splashed kerosene across the rotting wood. His lighter clicked, the flame trembling in the cold air. For the first time in days, he felt a spark of control. They can't hurt anyone else, he muttered. Not anymore. He dropped the flame. The liquid caught instantly, fire licking up the beams, spreading fast. Smoke poured from the windows, thick and black. Inside, shadows darted past the flames, small figures running, screaming, their voices carrying out into the night. Daniel froze. They weren't shadows. They were children. No. His chest tightened. No, you're not real. But their screams didn't sound like whispers anymore. They sounded alive. The fire spread, the roof beginning to buckle. And through the smoke he saw them. Dozens of small figures at the front door, pounding against the glass, eyes wide with terror. Daniel's lighter fell from his hand. Had he just killed them? Had he doomed the very children he came to save? His mind spiraled, horror and guilt tearing at him. For a brief fleeting moment he thought he'd done the right thing, that he'd freed them. But then the laughter started again, rising above the crackle of fire, echoing from the flames themselves, and the children vanished, leaving only the burning house. Daniel stumbled back, choking on the smoke. His recorder slipped from his pocket, landing in the grass, the red light still blinking. The last words it captured before the tape ended were his own. My name is Daniel Harper, and I don't think I'm leaving this place alive. The flames roared higher, and from behind him, in the darkness of the trees, dozens of small voices whispered in unison. Yes, you are. Some houses burn to ash and vanish. But others, like Winslow, carry fire inside them, fire that doesn't consume wood, but souls. And Daniel Harper was about to learn that burning the orphanage hadn't ended anything. It had only unlocked what was waiting beneath. October 20th, 1993. 2:46 a.m. Daniel sat on the hood of his useless car, staring at the flames tearing through Winslow House. The roof collapsed inward with a thunderous groan, sparks raining into the night, but no sirens came. No neighbors appeared. It was as if the orphanage stood in a world separate from the rest of the town, its own prison, its own graveyard. By dawn, the fire was gone. The house stood blackened, skeletal, but not destroyed. The walls remained upright, stubborn against ruin. Daniel whispered, broken. "Why won't you die?" Smoke still clung to the air as he forced himself back inside. Charred beams groaned overhead. The floor was littered with ash, but his recorder, miraculously, was still there, its tape intact. He descended into the basement again, the stench stronger than ever. His flashlight beam landed on the far wall and his stomach twisted. The circle of ash had grown, symbols sprawled wider, deeper into the stone, glowing faintly red as though fed by the fire above. And within the circle, something new had appeared, a wooden chest, blackened by soot, iron-bound. It hadn't been there before. Hands shaking, Daniel approached. The padlock snapped easily under the crowbar. Inside lay stacks of brittle papers, bones wrapped in cloth, and a thick leather-bound book. Daniel lifted it carefully, coughing as soot drifted into the air. On the cover, embossed in faded gold, were the words, "The Winslow Legacy." His breath caught. This was it, the family's record, their truth. He flipped the pages with care. What he read made his blood run cold. The book detailed the Winslow bloodline back centuries, rituals passed from parent to child, generation to generation. They believed children carried pure energy, untarnished by sin, stronger when orphaned and unloved. That energy could be harnessed, consumed, and transferred to extend life. The orphanage hadn't been a charity. It had been a feeding ground. One passage struck him hardest. The chosen will not pass to heaven or earth. They will remain in shadow, tethered to the place of sacrifice, until the bloodline is broken. Daniel's hand trembled as he traced the words. The children weren't ghosts. They were trapped, bound by the Winslow family's rituals, and until the Winslow name ended, they would never be free. At the back of the book was a family tree. Daniel skimmed the names, Henry Winslow, Margaret Winslow, their children, until he saw something that made his vision blur. The line didn't stop in the 1960s. It continued, and at the very bottom, written in neat, deliberate ink, Harper, Daniel, 1963, his knees gave way. The book slipped from his hands. No, that's not possible. But it was. He wasn't just investigating the Winslows. He was one of them. The basement air shifted. The temperature plummeted. The whispers rose again, louder, angrier, echoing through the stone. "You are one of us. You brought us here. You will feed us." Daniel screamed. "I didn't know. I didn't choose this." The children's figures emerged from the darkness, dozens of them, faces pale, eyes hollow. They formed a circle around him, their voices blending into a chant. "You can end it. Or you can join them." His flashlight flickered violently. The iron chair in the circle gleamed, waiting. Daniel's breath came in short gasps. The book lay at his feet, open to the passage. The bloodline must be broken. He understood. If he died here, if he gave himself willingly, maybe the children would be free. Maybe the rituals would end. But terror gripped him. He couldn't bring himself to sit in that chair. Instead, he clutched the book, holding it high. "If this is what binds you, then I'll destroy it." The children shrieked, a sound so piercing it rattled his teeth. Shadows surged forward, knocking him to the ground, clawing at his arms and face. "Burn it!" one voice cried. "No, keep it!" Another shrieked, conflicting, desperate. Daniel staggered to his feet, stumbling toward the stairs. He barely made it out, slamming the basement door shut behind him, the book still clutched tight. Outside, dawn had fully broken. The orphanage stood silent, blackened, almost peaceful in the morning light. Daniel looked down at the book in his arms. The leather pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. In the distance, sirens finally wailed, the fire department. Hours too late. And from behind him, through the cracked orphanage windows, a single child's voice called out, clear, sharp, inevitable. "Come back, cousin. Some legacies are built on land, money, and power. But the Winslow legacy was carved from silence, shadows, and vanished children. And for Daniel Harper, discovering his bloodline didn't just uncover the truth, it demanded a price. October 20th, 1993, 9:15 a.m. Daniel sat on the curb outside Winslow house, the book heavy in his lap. The fire trucks had finally arrived, men in yellow helmets dousing walls that no longer burned. They asked questions, but his answers made no sense even to himself. I don't know. The fire started on its own. Nobody lives here. The chief squinted at him, unconvinced. But he let Daniel go, maybe because the ruin spoke for itself. Still, Daniel felt the eyes. Not of the firefighters, of the house, the children. The book pulsed faintly, its heartbeat matching his own. Daniel didn't go home. He couldn't. He drove straight to the county archives, the book stuffed in his jacket like contraband. He dug through old census records, adoption ledgers, and death certificates. Every name lined up. The Winslow family had run orphanages across the state. Boston, Salem, New Haven. In every record, the numbers didn't match. Children admitted but never leaving. No adoption papers. No graves, and buried deep in a yellowing file was the truth about him. Adopted, 1963. Mother, Margaret Winslow. Father, unknown. Child placed under Harper guardianship. His hand shook. His whole life had been a lie, a careful cover. He wasn't a journalist chasing a story. He was the story. That night, he told himself he wouldn't return. But at 2 a.m., his car was already on the road. The orphanage loomed black against the moonlight. The air was colder here, unnaturally so. The book seemed to tug him forward. Inside, the basement door was open. He hadn't left it open. He descended slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The circle glowed brighter than before, symbols etched deeper into stone. The chair gleamed like it had been polished, and around it, dozens of children's faces, pale, hollow-eyed, watching. "You carry their blood," a child whispered. "You can end it," another hissed. "Sit, take their place. Free us." Daniel's chest tightened. "If I give myself, will you be free?" "Yes," a chorus replied. "No," another voice growled. Conflicting, broken. The children didn't agree, and then he understood. The Winslows hadn't just trapped them. They had bound them to their cruelty. The children had become fragments, torn between innocence and the hunger forced upon them. They weren't just victims anymore. They were part of the curse. Daniel clutched the book. He knew now. This was the key. Destroy it, and maybe everything will end. Keep it, and the cycle would continue. He raised it toward the circle. "You don't own me," the children screamed, shadows lunging. His flashlight shattered, plunging the basement into red glow. The book throbbed in his hands, resisting, alive. "Burn it," he begged himself. "Burn it now." But as he struck a match, the whispers changed. "Harper, Winslow, you are us. If you burn it, you burn yourself." For a moment he saw visions. His own face pale, hollow-eyed, sitting in the iron chair forever. Daniel's tears blurred the glowing circle. He couldn't join them. He couldn't let the curse spread either. With a final scream, he threw the book into the circle. The symbols flared blindingly bright. The children shrieked, their voices shaking the walls. The chair rattled violently, chains snapping, and then silence. The glow faded. The book lay in ash, nothing but charred fragments. The children were gone. The circle was empty. Daniel stumbled out of the basement, coughing, shaking. The orphanage was still. For the first time since he'd stepped inside, it felt hollow. He collapsed in the front yard as the sky lightened toward dawn. But then he heard it. Not whispers, not screams, just one child's voice, soft, almost grateful. "Thank you." In the years that followed, the Winslow house was finally demolished. Developers tried to build over the land, but every project failed. Accidents, bankruptcies, unexplained collapses. The ground itself seemed unwilling to forget. Daniel Harper disappeared not long after. Some say he moved states, changed his name, tried to bury the truth. Others believe he never left, that he walks the ruins at night, keeping the shadows from returning. The records of the Winslow orphanages remain incomplete. Dozens of children never accounted for. No graves, no explanations. And though the house is gone, locals still whisper of strange things near the old site. Children's laughter in the wind. Small handprints appearing in fresh cement. A voice calling faintly. "Come back, cousin. The end."